YouTube, welcome back. We are about 1 month into Cycle 1, League number 1 of 1.0 for Last Epoch. And the question is, what have people been playing? You watch Twitch, you watch YouTube, you know what the strong builds are, you know what the Pog face, oh my goodness, this build does 1 billion damage. But what about POE Ninja? Because a lot of you, like myself, have played Path of Exile in the past, and POE Ninja is a drug that I have not been able to hit for a long time. I miss POE Ninja. We have something that's kind of similar to POE Ninja. We have the ladder system. So before we get started here, we have a lot of builds we're going to talk about. We're going to highlight builds that people have been using in the arena, builds that have been performing very well. Some of the builds we talk about, especially Falconer, will have a lot of bugs in them, but I will call those bugs out when I recognize them. We're going to talk about strong builds that people have used in arena, maybe some interesting builds, and we'll talk a little bit about build diversity. This is not necessarily going to be the strongest builds, because sometimes a build does better in arena and it does not necessarily do as well in monoliths, and sometimes a build vastly overperforms in monoliths and doesn't necessarily transition well into arena. So take that with a grain of salt. These are builds that are strong in arena that people have been playing. I am not going to show you who made the build. You can look them up yourself if you'd like to. I'm not going to tell you what wave they pushed to, because balance in Last Epoch in 1.0 is kind of a nightmare. This might be the least balanced that Last Epoch has ever been, so I'm not going to try to compare like the best Falconer build with the best Forge Guard build, because I don't think that's a productive conversation. But these are sweet builds. So let's see what people have been playing in 1.0, and we will dig into some of the interesting stuff that we found while looking through the solo ladder. So this is lastepochtools.com. Thank you, damn it, for having this wonderful website. Love it. You can see the ladder function up here. We've been digging through these. I would love someday if instead of only sorting by classes and skills, if I could also sort by unique item, because that'd be so good. It'd be like one step closer to being POE Ninja. But this is basically what we've done here for the release cycle of 1.0 for solo one-player mode. Cool. We're going to talk about primalist builds first. I've got a bunch of primalist builds loaded up here, and these will be, let's see. Let me pull up my huge list of builds that I have on the second screen here. These will be Beastmaster first. So in the world of Beastmaster, there's one build that seems to be really shining. So this is like probably the maybe the best build overall. It's definitely something that the people who are tryhards, who really play Last Epoch aggressively, have told me about many times in Twitch chat. So this is something that's already on my radar. This is a low life swipe EQ build. This person has 136 strength and 136 intelligence coming in from Cleaver Solution. You get your Bastion of Honor as well, because even though this item has been like significantly nerfed and changed, it's not a bad item. It's just much more niche than it used to be. But having 100% block chance against all nearby enemies and being a melee build, those two things kind of go hand in hand. So we have a lot of the low life suite of items here. Red Ring of Atlaria works out well when you're using a Cleaver Solution and stacking a strength, because you're already going to hit that requirement pretty easily. And then we have just normal physical damage. Swipe generates some mana for you. It gives you some crit multi. You get to EQ monsters. It deals a ton of damage. So this is the Beastmaster build that I've seen the most frequently on the ladder. It really seems to dominate the ladder. Someone in Twitch chat said, like, not minions? Maybe not minions? Is there a minion build out there that's like giga popular? I know that there's a couple of interesting things that you can do with Tempest Strike these days. And I've even seen some like Aftershock EQ stuff. But this seems to be the go-to build for Beastmaster. It seems to dominate the ladder currently. Let's go to build number 2. Build number 2 is a Shaman build. There is a little bit more diversity when it comes to Shaman. There's 2 styles of this build that we're about to look at. And this is a tornado spam build. I kind of had these like in the same category. So there's a life-based tornado spam. And you'll see that in this kind of build, we have Gathering Storm. This is a Frostbite character. We are, let's see. Are we Frostbite? Yeah, we're Frostbite with Frostbite Shackles. There we go. So Gathering Storm is the new skill that came out with 1.0. It's harmonizes some of the Shaman masteries, so it's got some cool stuff going on. So these nodes at the top of the Shaman mastery, it's like when you directly cast a spell, you have a chance to proc something, and then all those indirect casts that aren't directly being cast have a 20% chance to repeat. So this is a cool new addition to Shaman. And it's nice to see that this is also something that's performing well on the ladder for shamans. So this person is building a bunch of mana regeneration. You'll see that they're at 25 mana regen here. They are spamming some tornadoes, and tornadoes proc these storm bolts here. And all these storm bolts use the Gathering Storm skill tree. So they have extra cold penetration, they have the attunement, freeze rate penetration stuff there. And then Warcry giving us some percent increased damage, proccing Maelstrom, and Maelstrom gives us Frenzy and Haste. Pretty normal looking stuff. The Thorn Totem kind of looks like an outlier. It technically applies some chance to freeze on the enemies. We're not really scaling that damage, but all damage is good damage, and because you're Shaman, you'd also like to have a bunch of your resistances taken care of, because per each active totem gives you some resistance stuff in the Shaman skill tree. So this is like the life-based setup. Another direction that Shaman could take this is by going low life instead. And again, we see like the pretty meta solution of maybe some Red Ring of Valeria. This person went Osirian instead. Osirian giving you more damage per shock, more generic damage. Then Cleaver Solution plus Frostbite Shackles is a nice way to get ward retention on classes that don't build intelligence. And then a bit of Twisted Heart action as well, just because we can. So this build, pretty much the same thing. We're still a Frostbite build. Many normal looking stuff. We're just spamming Tornado, and pretty much the same setup for the rest of our skills here. And then we just happen to be low life with our Berserker node there. So kind of the same setup, but it's good to see the Tornado spam getting a healthy amount of mana regeneration, 22 on this character. And just putting as many tornadoes on the screen as possible, because tornadoes in Arena, they have really good coverage and they zap a lot of monsters for you with that Gathering Storm proc. The other build that's been performing well for Shaman is this one. This is a Thorn Totem build. This is something that you would have expected at the very beginning of the league as well. And this thing, this person has cast or critical strike chance on their weapon, which is like, it's too bad. One of the really cool things that you can do with this build now is there's something called Parry Chance. So Parry Chance helps you to get some extra defense onto your characters who are playing minion damage, because all of a sudden you get like Titan Heart, which gives you less damage taken. Then you don't get to use a shield, but Parry Chance it's kind of like Evasion Chance. It's a percent chance to take no damage from a hit. So that's something that you could put as a prefix without getting in the way of any of the normal looking minion affixes that you'd have on your gear. So that's something that could be here that isn't here. We have the one giant thorn, the Titan's Bane node down here, and then pretty normal looking stuff outside of that. Like we're walking around in Spriggan form, we're casting these as often as possible. And then I've seen a couple of these builds that have Summon Wolf as well. I don't know necessarily exactly what the rationale for Summon Wolf is. I think the answer is all damage is good damage, and you might as well just toss a Summon Wolf into there. In the past, this Summon Wolf ended up being something like Ice Thorns, because Ice Thorns is like technically something that was fine, but with Ice Thorns being converted to Gathering Storm on this patch, it doesn't really do anything anymore. So you have like this fifth slot, and we once again have like the Spriggan form problem of I only get access to a couple skills. What do I put over here? So I think Summon Wolf is the answer to that. So EHG, if you're out there, it really would be nice to have maybe one, maybe two more skills that are accessible when I'm in my my Spriggan form here. It would be nice. Let's go on to the last three builds for Primalist, and then we'll shift gears to talk about something else. But first up, for Druid, we have a Frostbite Thorn Shield build. And I mentioned at the very beginning of this that we had some builds that were going to be like really good for Arena, and other builds that would be really good for Echoes, and not necessarily all those builds are the exact same thing. I'm going to call out this build as something that's probably something you're only interested in playing if you are in Arena. This build might be a little bit awkward if you're trying to bring it into Echoes instead, but it's got some interesting stuff going on. So this is Frostbite Thorn Shield. Thorn Shield, as you spam your Thorn Shield, you're generating a ton of armor. So this character is definitely armor capped. And as you spam it, it is a physical skill. Oh, wait, we're not using that because we're using Shattered Cycle instead. As you spam it, you are also generating ward off of something. You're generating ward off something, right? Oh, right. I forgot. I was like, wait, how are they generating ward? Right. They're generating ward off of swapping into and out of Spriggan form. So they have this node here, Leaf Barrier. So the amount of armor that you have transforms into ward. So they're going to flicker into Werebear form, and they might punch things with like their melee attack to generate some maelstroms. But realistically, you're going to swap back to Spriggan form as quickly as possible, and then as you enter, you're going to gain a ton of armor. Sorry, a ton of ward based on how much armor you have, which has been generated off of the Thorn Shields that you're casting yourself. So this person is tier 7 cast speed on a Shattered Cycle. Shattered Cycle is just a generically good item because it has a bunch of cast speed on it already. So then Frostbite Shackles, normal looking, wow, double tier 6. Holy moly, baby. Normal looking, cold damage over time. Because we have, I guess they're not going for the boots. I guess that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Just cooldown recovery speed. They're going tier 7 cooldown recovery speed because they want to swap between those two forms more often. Love it. Cast speed, cast speed, cast speed, cast speed, cast speed, cast speed. Yeah, just as much cast speed as possible. What a dream come true. Other builds that might be interesting to you when it comes to Druid is this one here. This is a Lightning Bug build, and we have two different variations of Lightning Bug. So Lightning Bug has been a fan favorite build in the past. There's something that's slightly different with it now. Instead of the tornadoes from lightning, or sorry, instead of the lightning from tornadoes scaling with the damage from the tornado skill tree, which is really nice because it benefits from the more tornado damage multiplier in Swarmblade form, we no longer get access to that. But instead, these Swarmblade builds get access to the entire Gathering Storm skill tree, which gives you things like flat critical strike chance per Maelstrom on your character. It gives you flat damage per melee damage on your weapon, and then it gives you some extra stuff while dual wielding over here as well. So we lost the 80% more damage from Army of the Tempest, but we gain a new skill tree and all the stuff that comes with it. So the first build here is a crit variation of the Lightning Bug. You see like some normal looking things. We have all the lightning synergies from Stormcarved Tempest. We have the Tempest Maw, and we're using an axe in the offhand because, of course, in Gathering Storm, we gain extra damage over here. Gathering Storm is interesting because the Storm Bolt proc, which is procced off of the Tornado skill, scales off of attunement at +1 flat damage per point of attunement. So we're interested in having attunement, which is something that we even get from using a Tempest Maw here. Other things of note is that this person's building mana, and mana is interesting because of Gathering Storm here. This node Excited Bolts, it says Storm Bolts, which you don't need storm stacks to make storm bolts happen. Common misconception. Storm bolts consume a portion of your current mana, and remember, for all intents and purposes, rage is mana, to deal more damage per 10 current mana. I believe this is technically still bugged, where it's consuming maximum mana as opposed to consuming 1% of current mana, but it's still only dealing damage based on the current mana of what you have remaining. Yeah, per 10 current mana there. So this is technically bugged. The mana, or like mana/rage, will be easier to maintain in the future, but you can still overpower the bug from this node here. And then, of course, this build is probably capped on armor pretty easily because it just happens to be a tanky build. We are capped on, I guess, are we capped on armor? You used to be able to cap on armor pretty easily. Did I misspeak? I probably misspoke about that, huh? Because there's some armor tech that you could do in this build in the past. But I guess, man, Static Shell is pretty cool. More armor against shocked enemies. Maybe you can cap armor on this. That'd be pretty neat. But definitely dodge capped off of Serpent Strike and these nodes here. So that's the crit version. The Frostbite version is pretty similar. There's a couple people playing a similar variation. So shout out to Bina, because I'm pretty sure that this is Bina's particular variation here. He was doing a Ghostmaker, which particularly gives you the ward gain on kill. So this is like, it's a Frostbite build, but it also, like, as long as we have Frostbite Shackles, we might as well try to generate some ward so that we can try to retain that ward. And getting a whole bunch of ward on kill, along with the ward retention from something like an Aurora's Timeglass, tends to be an okay thing to do in Arena, because you have swarms and swarms of monsters coming for you. You might as well turn those like monster kills into some ward and ward retention. So that's pretty cool. Similar to what we saw in the Shaman, we have the Gathering Storm with the Frostbite stuff here. because we're a Swarmblade, not only do we get the attunement scaling for Frostbite here in Winter Comes in the Gathering Storm skill tree, but we also get the nodes in Swarmblade form, which gives us freeze rate multi per attunement here. And then you turn that freeze rate multi into penetration based on Snowdrift boots. So there is a lot of synergy going on in this build. I like the looks of this a lot as well. Next up is Mage. And we have 3 classes to talk about here. We have Sorc, Spellblade, and Runemaster. So we're going to start out with Sorc. I would definitely call Sorc one of the most diverse classes right now, which also means like maybe it's diverse because it's not competitive. Maybe it's diverse because everyone's playing Runemaster instead. Maybe it's diverse because it's kind of boring, but it's definitely diverse. There's a lot of diversity going on in the world of Sorc right now. So I tried to find 2 particular builds that really stood out to me as like, these are what people are doing when they're trying to play seriously and try the strongest builds. We'll see. So coming first, I guess not first or second, but like the first of 2 builds for Sorc that we'll talk about is a Frostbite Frostclaw character. So in my mind, this is the kind of thing that I would rather play as a Runemaster because I value Rowan's Frost Guard, that runic invocation that gives you extra damage reduction. But here's what it might look like on a Sorc instead. So we have Mad Alchemist Ladle giving us a whole bunch of cast speed per intelligence, and then we're stacking intelligence all the way up to 26. Okay, so maybe let's keep talking. So the exceptional things that we're going to see about Frostclaw is the vast majority of Frostclaw builds end up taking the nodes on the very bottom left side because they actually got buffed in 1.0. So that's a cool thing that we will see on builds, but we don't happen to see it on this particular build. Instead of being able to instead of speccing Runic Invocation, the Sorcs don't have access to Runic Invocation, so they spec something else instead. These people have tended to spec Snap Freeze, the extra duration, the cooldown recovery speed, and then extra cooldown if you've like killed a frozen enemy recently. So this is what you get for not going Runemaster on your Sorc builds here. The rest of this should be pretty stock standard. We have like some minus mana cost. I guess not too much minus mana cost on Mad Alchemist Ladle, but we're still proccing our Ice Barrage. We are not going for these nodes over here, which I guess kind of surprises me. Ice Barrage, stuff, duration, minus. Yeah, I would have tended to do this. This is something that I've done in the past with my Frostbite Frostclaw stuff. But it looks like they went a little bit different direction with this. Let's take a look at the mastery, because I know you're asking yourself, like, what do you gain by going a Sorc instead of going a Runemaster? The answer is not too much. One of the interesting differences between Sorc and Runemaster is, like, Runemaster gets cooldown recovery speed if you build a bunch of intelligence. But on the other hand, if for some reason you're not stacking a bunch of intelligence, you still get a bunch of cooldown recovery speed. So this is a kind of an interesting difference between these two, which is really stretching because I don't think that there's much of a difference in favor of Sorc between these 2 masteries here. But that's what we're looking like in the world of Sorc. The other build for Mage that we saw a lot of, unfortunately we don't have any idols here, but you can kind of imagine what this is, and it's an interesting thing to talk about as well. I would call this a Dragwrath Claw Spark Charge character. So we're basically playing the build that's written on Dragwrath Claw. We are attacking with a melee attack. We're proccing Lightning Blast. And then because we're attacking with a melee attack, we're also proccing a handful of other things. So this person is holding down right click. They hold down Mana Strike. Mana Strike is applying spark charges for them. When they are attacking with Mana Strike, they have a chance down here to proc Frostclaw as well. And then as they're attacking with Mana Strike, they are applying Lightning Blast because of the Dragwrath Claw. And the Lightning Blast is applying some extra spark charges for their character. You could even make this even weirder by unspecking either Enchant Weapon or Flame Ward and adding in Frostclaw, having an additional chance to proc your Ellie Nova, and then your Ellie Nova could even proc spark charges too. But at that point, you have like 8 or 9 skills that you want to specialize. So you got to trim at some point. You can't just have 9 skills specialized. Though, EHG, if you want to let me do it, that'd be a very nice thing for you to let me do. This person has some interesting stuff going on in their Sorc build, which is cool to call out for 1.0. This is a Fractured Crown, an item that still exists in Last Epoch. So it says damage dealt to mana before health, and this person has continued to build tier 7 endurance threshold, which is kind of interesting. In the past, Fractured Crown plus tier 7 endurance threshold was a really interesting and really cool way to build defenses on a Sorc build, because the damage would be affected by endurance threshold and then would be sent over to your mana, and then you could like recover your mana by using Mana Strike. Right now, that interaction's been deleted from the game. It's been confirmed to be a bug, so it no longer exists. So the rationale for this particular person to build endurance threshold is much more slim, but technically I still see where they might be trying to come from. The justification could be recovery mechanisms, life gain on hits, having any kind of leech is stronger when you have like a low health pool, because you're recovering that much faster. So like your leech is being applied to like a smaller health pool overall. So I think this person, I know this person would have more effective HP if they built a whole bunch of life all over their character. But at that point, when you're building a whole bunch of life in your character, it's kind of just a different character, right? Like maybe you miss out on the cooldown recovery speed on your belt. Maybe you miss out on the armor and the cooldown on your boots. Like maybe you're just like gearing the entire character differently at that point. But technically speaking, in terms of effective HP, like if I were going to play a Fractured Crown character, I would aim for like 2,500 or 3,000 life, and then I would just happen to have some damage taken from mana before health. But the fact that they're using Mana Strike and recovering so much mana is very cool, and it is notable. So this is definitely a cool build that is out there for Sorc. The next one that we're going to take a look at is the Spellblade stuff, and surprise, surprise, we have a very similar looking build. Look at this. So this is a ward-based character that is not going Fractured Crown. So just normal looking stuff, very similar to what we had before. Spellblade, Dragarath, Spark Charge stuff. Notably is the inclusion of these two items, Invoker's Static Touch. This is a chance to gain 75 ward when you hit a shocked enemy, and you have a lot of small hits. This is not when you use an attack and hit, this is when you hit. And we have Spark Charges, which shotgun, and Mana Strike hits in an AoE. And we have TP plus Ellie Nova. Nope, no, we don't have TP. Why don't we have... I would have TP plus Ellie Nova, but the fact that this person is playing Dragarath's Claw means, of course, they want to spec their Lightning Blast, and their Lightning Blast applies even more Spark Charges for their character here. So this is a pretty normal looking build, given that we just looked at one of these previously. Let's move on to the other direction that people take their Spellblade builds, and that is this one. This is the spiciest version, but other than the incredible amount of spice here, it is pretty standard. So this is a crit Shatter Strike character. Shatter Strike is known for generating a ton of ward because it has a little bit of attack speed built into it, but it also has this repeats node on the bottom here. So it recasts 2 times. All of these Shatter Strike builds tend to need Mana Strike because they attack so fast, they annihilate their mana, and then they attack with Mana Strike to get their mana back. So on top of that, we have some Frostclaw, which happens to cast when they attack with a melee attack because they're attacking so often. We have Fire Conversion here. Maybe we can figure this out on the fly. Fire Conversion, Frostclaw, and then also proccing Ellie Nova. I think it's just a matter of like all hits are good hits. Melee hits, melee critical strike multi. Why exactly is it there? Can we figure out on the fly why it's here? Maybe Twitch chat can help me figure out why Frostclaw is spec. It's cool, but like, why is it there? Maybe they had nothing else to spec. So the reason that I wanted to call this out in particular is, chance to gain ward on crits with Ring of the Third Eye. You think that's it? Oh, maybe they just wanted more ward on crit. That could definitely be the reason. The reason that I wanted to call out this build is like, okay, it's crit, melee, Shatter Strike, which to me sounds very normal, but they built it in such a spicy way. So this person has Core of the Mountain, which of course has some damage immunity built into it. And then instead of stacking intelligence, we're just not stacking intelligence. So normally when you play a mage, you have access to all these nodes that have the word intelligence written on them. But what if you just didn't? What if instead you stacked strength, strength giving you access to a whole bunch of armor on your character, and then you just used Cleaver Solution to turn that armor, or to turn that strength back into intelligence. Kind of weird, kind of spicy. Definitely a defensive oriented person here, given how they built their character. Even Somnia is allowing them to like stun enemies and like proliferate that stun to anything else in Arena, which is a very cool direction to take this character. And then of course Eye of Reen, which is much better than my Eye of Reen because they hit tier 7 attack speed, whereas me, a very unlucky person, did not hit tier 7 attack speed. Very cool character here. I'm going to hover over the rest of this. Tier 7 strength on your Anchor of Oblivion because it has strength on it. Why wouldn't you use the strength item? It's so good. Let's see. 4 LP Boulder Fists. Oh yeah, with tier 7 strength, tier 5 melee attack speed, the dream. Dexterity. Dexterity gives you flat damage on your Shatter Strike. Yeah, cool. Just absolutely incredible. This is a melee build. You could technically get more damage out of this build by going for the Doom Ring, Siphon of Anguish, along with Shattered Change, the Doom Belt. That would give you 20% more damage on this character. You would lose out on something like Quicksilver Coil, so you'd want to get haste somewhere else. You lose some melee attack speed too, but it's a trade-off. Those are the kinds of things that you ought to know about when you're playing a melee character. Cool. Yeah. Let's take... Oh, is it spec for mana? Wait, is it? Oh. Does this work? Is Frostclaw spec for the mana recovery? Maybe it is. Oh, maybe that helps you hold down Shatter Strike more because it guzzles your mana so quickly. Yeah, that could totally be the solution here. Interesting. Good observation. Next up, we have Runemaster. We have 3 Runemaster builds we're going to look at. I would say the Runemaster has a lot of diversity going on right now, but the first thing I want to call out is like recast Frostclaw is definitely something that we see a lot of, and it has huge coverage both in Arena and in Echoes when you're doing your Monolith stuff. So recast Frostclaw, I'm using that to refer to these nodes on the bottom left side. Frostclaw got buffed for some reason in 1.0, and they lowered the mana cost on these nodes down here, which means it's much more tenable to include these on your character without going through extreme lengths like I needed to in patch 092 when I tried to do this. So this is a Spark Charge recast Frostclaw character. A very normal looking Spark Charge stuff. Lots and lots of intelligence. This person went for Jewelra Star Dial as well, which is adorable. I love this idea. And then, of course, if you have so much intelligence already, why not use the rarest item in the game? Cool. Wish I had one too. I'll hover over the rest of these skills. They're, let's see. Runic Invocation. Let's see. Can we find out what they're doing for Runic Invocation? Their Flame Rush is cold converted. Their Flame Ward is not cold. So it's CF. Are they using CFC? Oh, are they using Cold Fire Cold for Rowan's Frostguard? So they have twice as much defense as they normally would? Wow. What an excellent choice. Okay, so they're using Rowan's Frostguard. Pretty good. And then Elianova procced off of their Frostclaw just to get even more Spark Charge stuff over here. Something that I might consider doing is getting the Overload chance over here just to have even more AoE, but it looks like they kind of achieved the same thing by going for the extra area down here, because when you're proccing it off of Frostclaw, you actually get these nodes all the time, whereas if you're proccing Elianova off of TP, you don't get to do this piece of technology, which is a cool observation, cool innovation. The second build that we're going to look at for Runemaster is kind of the same, so like we have more recast Frostclaw stuff. So instead of going Spark Charges, we have someone who is instead going for Frostbite stuff. So the normal looking Frostbite items, the unofficial set in Last Epoch, Frostbite Shackles plus Snowdrift Boots, some less damage taken, less damage taken from an Ignited Shock Chills enemies, Frostbite on hit. This technically allows you to get more freeze rate per sec of chill. Freeze rate per sec of chill doesn't give you more damage, but it does make it much easier to freeze stuff. They have their -5 mana cost on Frozen Ire. After my own heart, the only thing that can make this better is tier 7 cast speed as well. But double tier 7 is definitely asking for a lot. So I'll hover over the rest of these skills. They're not using TP. They're using Flame Rush. They're using Cold Fire Cold as well. So they have like their double layer of defense off of Rowan's Frostguard and from Flame Ward 2. So pretty cool. We're going to take a look at one other Runemaster build before we move on to the third starting class. This one is more of an honorable mention. I think that there's a lot of diversity in Runemaster, and this is the kind of thing when you start poking around, what are people actually doing? So I would have expected that like the most common runic invocation would be like either Rowan's Frostguard for defense or Plasma Orb, because Plasma Orb was good in the past and it got buffed in 1.0. This person, as far as I can tell, and I'm pretty sure I'm right about this, this person is going for Aragon's Mirror Bolt, which is something that used to do insane single target damage, and it got nerfed in 1.0, but I think it's still very, very good, and it's a source of ward generation, which is cool. So with Aragon's Mirror Bolt, they're building a whole bunch of dodge. You can see all of their 1x1 idols here have dodge on them. Then they're using Rowan's Fortress, which gives you +1 damage per 10 armor dodge or ward, whichever one's the lowest. Dodge is basically always the lowest, so they're using that. And then they have dodge rating per Heo rune, which goes along with their Aragon's Mirror Bolt, and some extra flat armor from the invocation here. It's like the armor per raw rune, which is the second line of text on that first prefix modifier on their helmet, which is absolutely adorable. So this is I'm like 95% sure that I understand what's going on in this build. But Aragon's Mirror Bolt, we have some recast stuff down here. And I think what they're doing with the minus mana cost node taken in Static Orb is I think they're casting Static Orb as a ball lightning. Like they're cast. And then whenever this thing comes off cooldown, they're just like casting their Aragon's Mirror Bolt and like zip, like zips from one enemy to the next enemy, dealing insane damage. And then for single target, it does the same thing. So I think this build is sweet. I'm really happy that we found this thing. And this would be the kind of thing that, like, if you told me that you tried out this build and it's like cool as hell, I think that I would believe you. I would totally believe you. Does Flame Rush proc? Yeah, Flame Rush procs the runic invocation down here as well. So yeah, if this ends up being like one of the coolest builds that we've talked about today, wouldn't doubt it. This looks awesome. For our third starting class here, we have the Healing Hand starting class. So if you don't know, they completely took out Sentinel. They've replaced Sentinel with just Healing Hands. You can do the Armor Healing Hands guy, you can do the Holy Healing Hands guy, or you can do the Corrupted Void Healing Hands guy. But basically all the builds we found are just Healing Hands. So we have Sentinel builds. We're going to talk about 3. One's Void Knight with Healing Hands, one's a Forge Guard with Healing Hands, and one's a Paladin with Healing Hands. This doesn't necessarily surprise me. There is other stuff going on. There's a little bit of like Warpath here and there. There's some Judgment gamers out there who like using Javelin as well. But for the most part, the only new thing going on with Paladin, with Sentinel, the only new thing going on with Sentinel is Healing Hands, and it's awesome. Note that Healing Hands, like, oh, it's so boring. You can play it as melee and spell. You can play it as channeled or non-channeled. You can play it as ailment or non-ailment. You can play it as procced or non-procced. And then you can use different skills to proc it if you're playing a melee character. There are so many different ways you can play Healing Hands. I really think it's an amazing addition to Last Epoch. We just need to take care of the old ward thing, because the ward thing is obviously totally OP. Let's talk about our first build here. This is a Void Knight. These builds used to be building cast speed because there was a bug where even if you converted your Healing Hands into a melee attack, it still scaled with cast speed. Now that that's been fixed, all of these build planners look a lot more normal. So this is a Healing Hands, proccing Healing Hands Void Knight. So Healing Hands we turn into a melee attack. We take 4 points over here. When you directly use a melee attack, which includes Healing Hands, you hit with melee attack, or so you hit with Healing Hands. So this thing echoes here. And then, because we're playing a Void Knight, it has a chance to echo again. We are a very squishy character. Yeah, I guess that's the only thing to say. So, like, this person has 1,200 life. We are dual wielding. Based on the EHP calculations that I've done in the past, I've looked at every major archetype in Last Epoch and seen how much effective HP they have. This is the squishiest thing that you can do in Last Epoch, other than, like, a naked mage, I guess. Even then, we're dual wielding. No, this is basically the squishiest thing you can do in Last Epoch. But we have Healing Hands, and Healing Hands generates 100,000 ward. So this build is really, really strong. Let's take a look at everything else that's going on here. Now that we have the squishiest possible thing with extremely high damage that's playable because of ward generation, we have Volatile Reversal, strongest skill in the game. Lunge for lots and lots of mobility. Healing Hands, proccing Healing Hands. sigils, because why not? Giving us more healing effects and flat damage here. And we are a fire damage build. We are not a void damage build, so we don't really care about sigils of despair up here. And then anomaly, we don't need the health leech, so we can just spec all of these nodes for all of our crit chance, attack speed, cooldown, recovery speed, everything that we could possibly want in the anomaly skill tree. So this character is pretty decked out. This is something that was toward the top of the VK ladder doing arena. But like things like healing hands, attunement, sorry, like plus levels of healing hands, attunement, healing effect, attack speed. That's the entire build. Spell damage for fire necrotic. I think the Immolator's Ablation here is strictly here because it gives us Frenzy, which is adorable and also worthwhile because Frenzy is attack speed, and attack speed, healing effect, and attunement are things that all scale your offenses and defenses at the same time. If you wanted to go insane with this, you could also opt into Frostbite Shackles and get some cold resistance, and that would help you preserve the ward that we have with ward retention. But these builds are already so tanky, and this is the direction that I took as well when I was building my character. Just use Hand of Judgment because it's got attunement on it, and attunement gives you offense and defense, gives you fire penetration, and it's much easier to get one of these with 3 LP than it is to get a Frostbite Shackles with 3 LP, and you won't lose your mind trying to farm it. Next up is a Forge Guard. So this is Healing Hands build number 2. This is definitely the spiciest Healing Hands build. So it's a Forge Guard, which is definitely one of the most diverse classes out there because no one's playing it. So here's a non-crit. Where is it? Wait, where'd the gear go? Wait, there it is. Okay. This is a non-crit Forge Guard using Chronostasis and Cleaver Solution. And it's melee channeled Healing Hands. This build is wild. Is it good? I have no idea, but we found this toward the top of the Forge Guard ladder. So it's melee channeled, so we don't care about attack speed. We already have like a bunch of ward generation, and when you start the channel of Healing Hands, it should snapshot how much damage you gain from your Chronostasis. Is this good? I don't know. It's cool. It's definitely cool. We are a non-crit build because we're playing the non-crit Forge Guard Mastery that doesn't take all the crit chance nodes. Because why would you? The other interesting thing about this build is, remember, Healing Hands has the Cleric's Wrath node that gives you more damage per level of specialized buff skill. And then we have Javelin here, which gains the buff skill when you spec it like this with the Battle Standard node. I think this person is actually using Javelin as well, because when you use it, remember, you gain like 140% increased damage based on your attunement. But when they use a throwing attack, they also proc Hammer and Anvil. So I think what this person is doing is like genuinely, honestly using the Hammer and Anvil stance. So normally they're in Anvil stance, but then like when they really want to juice up their damage, they click their Javelin, which not only gives the percent increased damage from being inside the Javelin's battle standard, but it also gives you 25% more damage dealt and 25% more damage taken as well, which is completely adorable. I don't know if it's good, completely adorable. So the rest of this is just like a very normal looking, completely normal, stock standard, nothing interesting about this build. Healing Hands, you know, except for the non-crit Chronostasis, melee channeling, Hammer and Anvil stance. Everything other than that, completely normal Healing Hands build. The last one here is something that I have been playing on my stream as well. This is a awesome, one of the most beautiful builds in the entire game. This is a Divine Bolt Healing Hands Paladin. Why is it so good? It's because, well, we can take Healing Hands, we put 5 points into Divine Catalyst, saying that every time that we heal ourselves, so every time that we right click, we shoot Divine Bolt at nearby enemies, and then in the Paladin skill tree, we shoot +5. So we can shoot 5 enemies with 6, so we can shoot 30 beautiful, piercing projectiles in every single direction. And this build, it wants healing effect, cast speed, attunement, a little bit of crit chance to round things out. And it's just, oh my god, it's, if you haven't seen this build or played this build, it's absolutely stunning. We can take a look at their skills real quick so you see what's going on. If you use your javelin, you can get your, what is this? They have 50 attunements, so they get 100% increased damage when they actually use their javelin. But even if you don't use it, you're still benefiting from the Cleric's Wrath node in Healing Hands itself. Lunge, we have some extra mobility over here. Tiny bit of chance, or a tiny bit of frenzy, which we don't really need because we have frenzy from our belt from Immolated Ablation. And then Holy Aura, bunch of fire stuff, bunch of attack speed. They took the cleanse node here. I'd recommend taking this off because you never want to cleanse when you have immolators because you want all the flat damage possible. So this is a awesome build. I totally love it. Let's move on to the fourth starting class, Acolyte. For our fourth starting class, we got the Acolyte stuff going on here. First, we're going to talk about Necromancer, then Lich, then Warlock. I'd say that Necromancer and Warlock have the least diversity in these, and Lich seems to have a good bit of diversity. So we're going to talk about 3 Lich builds, 1 Necromancer, and 1 Warlock. So starting out of the first one, we have David Harbour and his completely busted helmet. He just he shows up, he tells us, he's like, oh, I play Last Epoch. He introduces one of the most busted items we've ever had, refuses to elaborate, leaves. David Harbour, why don't you join twitch.tv? Just go play with your helmet. I want to see David Harbour playing the David Harbour build. I don't see why he hasn't done that yet. What a great choice. What good publicity that would have been for him. In any case, we have the Necromancer build here. Every single build with Necromancer is this. Absolutely insane. Of the 3 most popular classes that have been that people have played in 1.0, there's Falconer, and then I think it's Necromancer, and then Warlock. So somehow Necromancer is more popular than Warlock is. It's insane. In any case, this is a pretty normal looking build. Just like ward, some minion stuff on your ring, and the David Harbour helmet. I don't know the intricacies of this build because I famously don't really like minion builds. They're not really for me. But surely there are 1,000 build planners out there for this, and build guides and YouTube videos. This thing one-shots bosses. It deals 1 billion damage. It kind of shocks me that this thing's in the game. Surely, oh my god, it's 3 LP death rattle. Surely this build is going to be nerfed at some point, right? Right? It's one of the most busted builds I've ever seen. Let's move on from this and talk about something that is a little bit more build diversity, not just one build in the first 200 places of the ladder. Next up, we have Lich, which really does have more diversity. So the first style of build is going to be a Ghost Flame build. Ghost Flame is a Warlock build, but it gives you a ton of damage reduction, and it works out well when you're trying to survive in the higher levels of Arena. So we'll talk about Ghost Flame stuff first, and then we'll talk about a Potion Zombie build after that. First up is friend of the stream, Mao Mao X. This is actually his build, so shout out to Mao for pushing to be rank 1. This is a Poison Wandering Spirits Ghost Flame Lich. So the similarities between the 2 Ghost Flame builds we're going to look at are using Ghost Flame for damage reduction, taking the Disdain node for less damage taken while channeling, and I anticipate we're also going to have the less damage taken while channeling and the more damage to damned enemies while channeling as well. The Doom Herald node in Warlock just stands out as an excellent node, especially combined with the less damage reduction that we just looked at in Ghost Flame. So Ghost Flame is a hell of a skill. This person, Mao, ended up using Ghost Flame as a way to apply Decrepit Mortals. This causes enemies to take increased damage, which is kind of like a More Multiplier. Very good. And then the real only other thing that I see in this build is Wandering Spirits. So Wandering Spirits is pretty much all of the damage of this character. We are poisoning enemies here. Reperform gives us a little bit of poison. Death Seal, while it's active, it has that pulsing wave of death around it. And it also gives you tons of poison here. And then technically, you can transplant and just Goomba Stomp on top of an enemy, and you'll get a little bit of more damage there. We don't have many more multipliers here, so I see that this is primarily being used as a mana generator to help sustain Ghost Flame. But it really seems like just Wandering Spirits, along with all the percent damage and percent chance to apply poisons, is the majority of what's going on the DPS of this character. I would call this probably low DPS, but then again, I've talked to Mao, and he's told me that on the dummy, he can get like 400k strictly in terms of poison, which is a respectable number for poison. And then with all of his damage going at the same time, he figures that it's about 1.4 mil DPS, well, along with like the hit components of like Death Seal and stuff like that, which is wild because that is quite a bit of DPS. So taking a look at his mastery real quick, you'll see that these poison builds get to use the Vile Tide node, giving you poison overload. And this kind of makes up for the poison nerf. So remember, ailments used to be insane. They used to have ailment effect, which was strictly speaking a more multiplier. Ailment effect changed, and poison got kind of triple nerfed along that time. So ailment effect got changed into percent increased penetration with that ailment, which is the same bucket of more damage as shred and penetration. So kind of it was a nerf. It was a nerf to all ailments. But poison in particular, the ailment effect used to scale how much penetration you gained. And now instead with percent penetration, you just don't get the double dipping nature of what it used to be. Which means it got nerfed because it should have been nerfed because it was totally OP and now it's not totally OP. So in my opinion, the only poison builds that really exist in the game are builds that use poison overload. And I'm happy to see that there's at least one out there that is using poison overload. It's even a Lich, not even a Warlock, and it's performing quite well. So this makes me quite happy because of 400% penetration. Let's take a look at another build here. We're going to look at another Ghost Flame. Very similar ideas going on here. We are using our Ghost Flame. We were zipping around. Very similar idle situation. All of our mana efficiency with Ghost Flame along with Transplant was giving us our mana on the poison build. And then to sustain our mana on this other build, this is a Bleed Marrow Shards variation of Ghost Flame. This person again has mana efficiency, mana efficiency, mana efficiency. We have a little bit of cooldown recovery speed on our... Nothing. Got it. But we still... I would have expected some. But I guess... What was this? Nope. And okay, so 0. No cooldown recovery speed. And this person is still using Transplant to generate mana, so that's good. We have Marrow Shards, which Marrow Shards in a bleed build is a little suspect in my opinion, because it's used because it procs off of Ghost Flame, but we have no frequency nodes in Ghost Flame, right? So like it's not proccing any faster, and we're only gaining like a little bit of mana back from this, and like no cooldown recovery speed from our Transplant. So I suspect that the mana situation of this particular build is like a little bit suspect. Marrow Shards has a lot of more damage modifiers for hit damage, but it doesn't really have anything that's like generic more modifiers, something that would apply to bleed. So you'll see for this character, they went all the way to the right side to use Bone Splinter's bleed chance, which technically helps, I suppose, but Marrow Shards is definitely much, much better for hit damage and crit damage than it is for bleed stuff. So looking at the rest of the build, we'll see that there's a notable omission here. And it strikes me that we have the ward per second while channeling, ward per second while channeling. We have Bone Clamor Barbets, giving us a ward per second while stacking Necrotic Res. We have some Necrotic Res stuff here. I guess we don't. We don't have the Ward Decay Threshold. I'm kind of surprised not to see the Ward Decay Threshold here. But this is a ward build. This is an actual factual ward build that does not use Death Seal at all, which I would call suspect. But you know what? If you can generate enough ward, you'd like to keep that ward, wouldn't you? So, I don't know, man. Ward's in a really strong spot. When ward gets to the point where you're not using Death Seal on a Lich, it's like, I'm looking forward to the ward nerf. How about that? That's what I'm going to say. I'm looking forward to the ward nerf. So, Aura of Decay gives us some, let's see, healing effect. What is healing effect doing for us? I don't know. I guess it's just like less damage taken. Ailment duration. Inflict by this. Self stuff. Bleed chance. It applies bleeds. Is that it? Is that all it does? Am I a hater? Yes. Okay, I'm definitely a hater here. What is this doing? Why do we have this? All right, y'all can find a better rationale for Orb Decay than I can. But in any case, Ghost Flame, Bleed, Marrow Shards, and this build is keeping its ward instead of using Death Seal. So that is the interesting part of what this particular character is doing here. Pretty cool stuff. Your current ward is less... I wonder Font of the Erased... I'm not going to dwell too much on this, but maybe Font of the Erased is like a critical component of how their defenses work. Alright, that's for future my brain to work on, not right now. Let's look at one more Lich build. This is a Potion Zombie build, and I would have thought that this would be the only build that people play when it comes to Arena. I'm actually surprised to see that this is not the only build people are playing in the Arena. There are some good YouTube videos and build guides out here for this, but basically it is a Jungle Queen Chaps because it gives you 16 potion slots. And then we have volatile zombies summoned on potion use. This is absolutely insane. I'm actually surprised that this even exists in the game. It's like, why can I just push a potion 16 times and summon all these zombies? I don't really get it, but I guess EHG does. So we summon all these zombies. Some of these zombies, when they die, they generate more stuff. They generate some vanguards over here too. They give us a bunch of ward from this vital ward down here. And then to sacrifice, we're going to summon all the volatile zombies, and then we're going to blow them up. So we're casting Rip Blood in order to give ourselves a bunch of flat damage based on the Arcane Absorption node. And then we're transplanting because it has a kill threshold, why not? And that's really about it. That's the entire build. It's like, if you can get volatile zombies on your Jungle Queen Chaps, you have the build. You just slap some Cyclic Putrescence on there, and the build is very disgusting. The last one that we'll talk about here when it comes to Acolyte is the Warlock here. And definitely Warlock has low build diversity when it comes to the ladder. Basically every single build is this. I take issue with this build because I would like to get this build nerfed. However, I'll talk about that in just a moment here. So this is a Chthonic Fissure plus Spirit Plague build. That's basically how I would categorize this kind of thing. So we have Chthonic Fissure, we have Torment here. We're stacking up a bunch of necrotic resistance. Some people go low life, some people go like life based, and they just happen to have a whole bunch of ward. But I think the defining feature of these style of builds is, first of all, this node should be maybe, you know what? I told you at the very beginning of this video that I'd call out bugs when I see them. This might be a bugged version of the build, using Profane Veil with the 5 points in Vampiric Pool, along with the Bone Prison stuff down here, generating 600,000 ward-ish. That particular interaction was 10 times stronger than it was supposed to be. So I think this build was like a pre-nerf version of that. But what I do need to call out here is the most important interaction about this build is the Immolator's Ablation. In the past, I've told people that Immolator's Ablation only stacked up to 40 spell damage because that's what a developer told me that it did. It's actually not that. It's 40 stacks of Ignite going up to 40 times 6 is 240 flat damage, which sounds like a lot, but basically 0 builds in the game can actually get that much Ignite on themselves because it's gated by Ignite duration, which does not scale with your Ignite duration. It does not scale with you building more Ignite duration. And it scales with like cast speed. Like how much cast speed can you get? 200, 250, 300? So the reason that I take issue with this build, and like, yeah, this build's totally insane. I do feel like this needs to be addressed by EHG because Spirit Plague applies bleeds on you, and those bleeds get converted into ignites with Mail and Subris. So the unifying feature of all these Chthonic Fissure plus Spirit Plague builds is they got absolutely insane flat damage coming in from this interaction. I might make a different YouTube video on this at some point because I feel like I'm about to ramble about it. But yeah, this is the interaction between Immolator's Ablation and Mail and Subris, along with this node up here, allowing your Torment to just scale to the moon, along with, however, you know, your 600 necrotic resistance here that scales both your offense and your defense for these styles of characters. Let's move on. We got one more base starting class to talk about, and that'll be Rogue. We have 3 more masteries to talk about, and they're all rogues. So we're going to talk about Bladedancer, Marksman, and Falconer. You'll see that there's a lot of grouping that goes on in these things, and there's a handful of bugs that happens in one of the particular masteries. Falconer. It's Falconer. So we'll talk about those bugs too when we get there. First up is Bladedancer, and it really seems like when you're looking at the ladder, when you're looking at the builds for like the people that are playing, trying to like push the highest in the ladder, what tools are they using? And the answer is Explosive Trap. So the thing that I want to shout out about Explosive Trap first is that this node down here is way stronger than I thought it was before 1.0 launched. I didn't realize that this node could completely cap your glancing blows, and also Dust Shrouds give you flat dodge rating as well. If you pop open the mastery, for example, you see that this node here says they give you 50 flat dodge rating. So if we can cap our glancing blows and also get a huge amount of flat dodge rating, well, flat dodge is the hard part of dodge. Then you just build a little bit of like percent increase dodge. And then, in fact, if you're playing a Bladedancer, you even get 15% more dodge rating on top of this. So that's something that I got to do when I was playing a Spark Charge Bladedancer. But unfortunately, I didn't see a single Spark Charge Bladedancer when I was looking at the ladder. So what I did see is a whole bunch of variations of people using Explosive Trap to proc various things, to scale damage in various ways. Let's look at what they have been using. This first one here is Explosive Trap. It's a crit Acid Flask build. And is Acid Flask good? No. I can't wait for people to tell me that the answer is yes. Acid Flask is good when you can throw 6 or 10 of them at the same time, because that's like 500% increased damage or 900% increased damage, which is a astronomical number. But like, if you're right clicking and throwing Acid Flask, I'm kind of a hater. I don't think it's particularly good because it's basically unchanged with what it's been in the history of Last Epoch. But if you're proccing it off of Explosive Flask with these top middle nodes here, it turns out that having them proc and then re-trigger and then proc again, it's kind of insane. So it works out very, very well. This build needs to scale a bunch of flat throwing damage. You'll see that we have throwing attack speed, minus mana cost on the rings. Same kind of thing here, minus mana cost, trying to get the mana cost as low as possible because this particular person is throwing 10 of them, or so I guess 5 times 2. So they're throwing 5 at a time instead of just being sated with 3 at a time off the Tropos node. So if you're trying to include this as well, you really need some kind of mana to go along with it. So what's cool is that if you're using Shift, we also get the 4 nodes here in Switch Recovery. Low Life as a Bladedancer makes sense because we get the Bladedancer node giving us less damage taken and bonus critical strike chance off of Death's Door. But it also gives us some Shift synergy where it gives us a huge amount of mana, and then we build some cooldown recovery speed. We shift very often, and this allows us to somewhat maintain the huge mana cost that we have on our Explosive Trap here. So, what else is going on in this character? Pretty normal looking low life stuff. We're dual wielding because we want the plus levels to Acid Flask, and I think that's an appropriate thing to do. We have 4 LP Peak of the Mountain. Cool, why not? They got plus levels to Decoy because it gives percent increased damage. I don't think they're using the plus levels particularly well. Because they're not doing the Acid Flask stuff in Decoy. They're just using it to, honestly, I guess they're using it honestly, right? Like, it has some damage on it. It's going to decoy monsters. They're going to explode. They explode immediately, right? I guess they only explode immediately if you have Kelton Blasting Agent. Okay, so they have Kelton Blasting Agent. They toss a decoy. It explodes immediately. It generates a shadow for them, and then the shadow will throw the Explosive Trap. The Explosive Trap throws more Acid Flasks for them. There's a lot of good looking synergy here. Kind of like the looks of this. But yeah, so this build is very strong looking. I'm actually kind of impressed that we even have 2400 life. Of course, life is a good thing to do when you're playing an Exsanguinous build because it's percent of missing life gained as ward per second. So the more life you gain, the better you sustain because your ward recovery goes up and up and up. The second variation of Explosive Trap is this one here. This person is playing, I'm going to call this like a Dusk Shroud build, and I really like the looks of this one. So this person is, of course, using the same kind of setup in Explosive Trap. We're not doing anything with Acid Flask, but instead we are using Explosive Trap as damage. We have all the Dust Shroud generation from the Smoke Trap node, and then we have Umbra Blades. Oh, so Umbra Blades has this node here, and this node doesn't scale Shadow Daggers because Shadow Daggers are a weird ailment. They do not inherit anything from the parent skill that applies them unless explicitly stated otherwise. So what this person's doing is they have the more damage per Dust Shroud, and they have insane Dust Shroud generation off of Explosive Trap. So the majority of the damage from this character is coming from Umbra Blades instead of from Shadow Daggers. They happen to have the Shadow Dagger node because we have a dagger and it's very low opportunity cost to just include that in the build. You might as well. It's pretty free. But yeah, oh, it's so good. I love the looks of this. So it's not a Shadow Dagger build. You'll see that they don't have any Shadow Dagger penetration, no Shadow Dagger stuff in the build, except for the fact that they have a dagger. And then we have this one, We have the percent increased damage with Umbral Blades per stack of Dust Shroud. And of course, we have Gazunga Dust Shrouds. It's a pretty cool build. I like the looks of this. Dust Shroud, throwing attack damage, like a Dust Shroud combo build, you might call it. And they happen to have some Shadow Daggers because it only costs 1 point and it's a very low opportunity cost. Cool build. The third variation of this style of thing is the Frostbite one. So we have, again, Explosive Trap, very similar setup. We have Explosive Trap proccing our Acid Flask. And again, if we can throw, how many? We're throwing 5? Yeah, this person is throwing 5 and they all re-trigger to 10. And each of those throw Acid Flasks. So we're basically throwing 10 Acid Flasks per right click. And these are all going to apply Frostbites with Vial of Volatile Ice, the brand new unique item that just got introduced in 1.0. So the rest of this build, surprise, extremely standard, low-life looking stuff. We have our Sanguinus, we have our Last Step of the Living. We're not dual wielding, so we're not taking percent increased damage. But yeah, just very, very normal looking stuff. Attunement, Intelligence. Let's see, actual. Yeah, Attunement, Intelligence are equal. So they're proccing the 3 water orbs instead of 1 water orb off of Usanoi's, which is adorable. I like the looks of this a lot. Going from the Explosive Trap Mastery, we're going to talk about the Marksman Mastery. And if you've been paying any kind of attention to Last Epoch, you know that there's only one Marksman build. And they all share one thing in common. They have 0 points in the Marksman tree, because Marksman is a real mastery, EHG. So this is the most meta, extraordinarily strong, warps the entire rest of Last Epoch. People who have been introduced to Last Epoch, who see this build, scoff when they see the other 99% of builds that exist in the game. Because why would you play those when you could just play this monstrosity instead? So this is a Marksman build, because Marksman gets access to the Detonating Arrow skill tree, and that's all you need. Just Detonating Arrow skill tree and done. We get Ward on crit, because this item says less critical strike chance if you've dealt a crit strike recently, but you can just overwhelm that by building more critical strike chance. So you can still cap your crit even though you have this 50% less thing here. You don't end up generating much Ward on this character. You might get 1,000, you might get 2,000, but yeah, pretty low amounts. On the other hand, you get absolutely insane damage. You get really good coverage off of proccing your explosive traps off, proccing your detonating arrow off explosive trap in every which direction. And then remember, you're also dodge capped. You have invulnerability while shifting. You have extra dodge after you're done shifting. And then you have like capped glancing blows as well, even though you're on paper extremely squishy, because you have very low ward. You have you're dual wielding. You have no Death's Door from the like Bladedancer passive. You have no particular defense, but you got coverage, and you have damage, and you one-shotting things, and you also have lots and lots of dodge coming in from, again, the node in Explosive Trap here, and capped glancing blows as well from this same node. This node might be too strong, it occurs to me, but this is definitely one of the strongest builds, if not the strongest build, that's come out of 1.0. Maybe ever seen in Last Epoch. I'd have to think about that one. But let's move on to Falconer next, because we have 3 more builds to talk about. In Falconer, I want to start out by saying that looking at the Falconer Arena pushes, lots of them are bugged, or they have been bugged in the past. Lots of them are completely insane. If they're not bugged, they're just completely out of line with like the amount of balance. They're like the style of balance has been in the rest of Last Epoch. So it's not a good thing to compare a Falconer build with anything else, because Falconer deals insane damage basically with whatever you do. So we're gonna look at 3 Falconer builds. It's been hard to find all the bugs. It's been hard to find like builds that are bugged or aren't bugged. So take that with a grain of salt. Let's talk about this one first. This is the Exploding Ballista build. First up, this build has, I think, at least one major bug in it, and that was the incorrect AoE scaling on your ballista exploding. So all of these builds will have their ballista spec'd with 4 points over here in armor construction, giving more damage and increased area per dexterity. It used to incorrectly scale radius instead of increased area, which means that you were literally more than off-screening every time that you use ballista. which it turns out is pretty good for pushing 3,000 waves in the arena or the 3,000 corruption in the monolith system. So that's been nerfed. You have a little bit, considerably less AoE than used to, but the damage is unchanged. So you still have absolutely insane damage to go along with that. This person has 202 dexterity. Seriously? 224 dexterity. Oh, Jesus. Cool. Before this was nerfed, before the AoE was changed, people were advocating in favor of removing life and removing defenses from your characters, and instead just relying on one-shotting things off screen and also relying on silver shrouds. Hopefully that is no longer the recommended style of building the defenses of this ballista exploding thing, but good God, it used to deal a lot of damage in a huge AoE, and now it only deals a lot of damage in a reasonable AoE on your character. The entire build is dexterity plus mana regen. How much mana regen do they have? Yeah, Urzel's Pride, 29 mana regen. What a cool build. Let's look at the second Falconer build that's been performing well in the arena. This is one that is bugged. Okay, cool. It's another bugged build. So this is a Shadow Dagger build. You could build this in a non-bugged way, and I would still assume that it works out very, very well. So this is a Shadow Dagger Falconer. There's a lot of misinformation stemming from a handful of YouTube videos that came out about this originally. So just to clear up the misinformation, we have a dagger in our hand, and a dagger means that we can use the node in Umbral Blades that says we inflict Shadow Daggers on hit with Umbral Blades. Very, very strong. This node here that says your Umbral Blades hits now inflict Shadow Daggers, what it means is the Umbral Blades from this particular node, they will apply Shadow Dagger once. But if you take this one as well, they're going to apply even more Shadow Daggers. So it would be a huge mistake to play this character with this node and not with this node. So you need both of those if you really want to juice up as much damage as possible. And of course, you'd also be using a dagger in your Shadow Dagger Umbral Blade character. The bug that was happening with this character is apparent because of the helmet here. So this is ward gained on Shadow creation. Normally you'd look at that and say, hey, this is not particularly good, but this is part of the infinite smoke bomb glitch, the infinite smoke bomb hack, baby. And this was, of course, taking 4 points down here. For every second, it would generate a shadow for you. And then you just like have this smoke bomb in your hideout or something. And it was like generating ward for you every single second, something along those lines. In any case, it was busted and it no longer exists. If you find a build with the ward gain on shadow creation on the ladder, I'd venture that it's probably from before that nerf. In any case, is this build good? Yeah, certainly. You might build it a little bit differently, but just the fact that Shadow Daggers deal insane damage, they synergize well with Aerial Assault, you have lots of relevant defenses, you're very nimble playstyle, and I guess we're using Dive Bomb as well. So, sure, why not? Dive Bomb's the other thing that deals 1 billion damage. I don't know how much damage Dive Bomb particularly does in this character. Maybe 500 million instead of an actual billion, but I don't know exactly how much damage this is dealing here. Wish I did, but the rest of the character looks very stock standard to me. Let's see. Physical penetration, ward gained, physical penetration, ward gain, no LP, cooldown carry speed, strength, love it. Love the strength. It's adorable to me that like this is it's a Falconer, it's a rogue class that wants to use a cleaver solution. So if you want to build intelligence on a rogue, you actually can't build intelligence on a rogue. So you have to like LP intelligence onto your Exsanguinous, and then you can put on your rogue character. So one way around that is to use a cleaver solution instead, because then you can build strength on your rogue gear, and then your strength becomes intelligence, and that helps get around the class issue of not being able to build intelligence on your rogue gear. Which of course runs into the subsequent issue of you also can't build strength on your rogue gear. So you need to do things like this in order to get strength on your rogue gear, because otherwise you have no strength and no intelligence. So EHG, please allow me to put strength and intelligence on my rogue gear so that I can play builds like this without having an absolute heart attack. That about does it for the Falconer. I think we have one more to go. I would call this much more ethical. I think this build is more ethical because I don't know what the bug is. There's probably a bug. Maybe the bug is that Falconer is completely out of line with the rest of the balance in Last Epoch. Who knows? But this is a Bleed Falcon build. It looks very cool. I like the looks of it a lot. And what we're doing here is attacking with puncture. We're building up bleed % chance for ourselves. Dark Quiver is giving us a little bit of defense, a little bit of quality of life here and there. And really, the brunt of the damage here comes from Falcon and Falcon strikes, zipping around and striking things using our % chance to bleed, because we have bleed coming in from the Rending Talons here. We have bleed coming in from Blood Roost, and we even have our % bleed chance applying to their % bleed chance, the Falcon's bleed chance, with the Sky Assassin note here. So the more bleed chance we get on ourselves, so much more of that percentage gets applied to the Falcon as well. And the last bit here is just Smoke Bomb. Not Smoke Bomb, Dive Bomb. Dive Bomb is not being used for the insane Wombo combo over here. Instead, it's being used to pop those bleeds and deal some hit damage per bleed on the enemy. So a little bit of hit damage scaling on the bird itself. Cool. Plus levels, 4 LP Talons of Valor. Yeah, why not? Merchant's Guild. Is it Merchant's Guild? 4 LP, 4 LP. Yeah, it's probably Merchant's Guild. Yeah, love the looks of this. Not sure what the bug is. Would be completely unsurprised if there were a bug here. I just don't know what the bug is. Maybe it's not bugged. So, we have one more conversation that we're going to have here. Let's load up some nice background image for us. And that is build diversity. I'm going to link all these builds for you in the description of this video, because I think it's really fun to take a look at what is going on in Last Epoch. Because really, this kind of conversation is the best we can do when it comes to emulating POE Ninja. Oh my god, I miss POE Ninja. So this is my impression of what's going on with diversity in Last Epoch right now when it comes to people pushing the ladder and like playing the best builds possible. So I would say that the best diversity, which also comes from the least played class, the least competitive class, the oldest classes that are in need of an update, I saw a lot of build diversity when it came to Sorc builds and Forge Guard builds. Is that because there's no good builds? Is that because the meta is wide open because no one's really working on the meta builds? That's for you to comment on in the comment section of this video. But there's a lot of diversity in the Sorc builds and the Forge Guard builds that I saw while perusing the ladder here. Builds are classes that have like pretty good diversity, like only like maybe 2 or 3 different builds that really stood out. Runemaster had lots of variations of Frostclaw and lots of variations of what you could do with Runic Invocation. Remember, I was thinking that it was only going to be Plasma Orb for Runemaster, but it ended up being like Aragon's Aether Bolt, whatever it was called. So like that was really cool. A lot of cool Lich builds, both with and without the Ghost Flame technology. And Druid, just like, do you want to be a Werebear? Do you want to be a Spriggan? Do you want to be a Swarmblade build? Do you want to go Frostbite? Do you want to go Crit? A lot of variation that we saw in those. Some average diversity, not too much diversity that we saw here. Like Shaman had a couple things, but they all looked like tornado spam. Spellblade had a couple things. Bladedancer had a lot of diversity, but again, the Bladedancer builds that we looked at, they all were basically using the same technology of Explosive Trap, giving you dodge, giving you the Dust Shrouds and the Glancing Blows, right? When it comes to Paladin and Void Knight, you can play Warpath, you can play Healing Hands, you can play Healing Hands, you can play Healing Hands, you can play Healing Hands. You can play different kinds of Healing Hands, but there's a lot of Healing Hands and a little bit of Healing Hands and a little bit of Warpath to go along with it. In the low diversity department, it looks like the Warlock builds, the Marksman builds, the Beastmaster builds, and the Necromancer builds were all really low diversity on the ladder. The Warlock was basically all Torment. All those builds looked exactly the same when I was clicking into them. The Marksman build, there's 1, and it's been 0 points in the Marksman skill tree. Weird. The Beastmaster build was the crit, low life, melee, swipe plus EQ character that we looked at the very beginning of the video. And the very last one is the Necromancer, which is David Harbour's Harbor Wraith Lord helmet, which walks around and one-shots everything. Cool item. In the very bottom here, I have this final category. I don't know what the diversity of Falconer looks like, but I'm going to label the category, everything is bugged, everything's OP. I actually haven't played a Falconer yet in 1.0 because there seem to be a lot of bugs and there seem to be a lot of people one-shotting stuff. I've heard a handful of people come into my Twitch chat and say like, I played Falconer and then I stopped playing it because it was too good and it was too fast and it was too boring and everything's insane. So like maybe I'll play a Falcon if I can figure out like a Falconer build that's like okay, but kind of bad, but also off meta, but still fine. That's my kind of build right there, baby. So we'll see what I do with Falcon in the future, but I don't know where Falconer belongs on the diversity chart here. If you have a better impression of where Falconer belongs, like average, good, maybe low diversity, let me know, because I genuinely don't know where it belongs, because it's hard to look at the ladder, because everything's bugged on the ladder. I don't know what's performing well or not. But until we get to POE Ninja, this is the kind of rundown that we can do of the builds that people have been playing. We have 1 month in, one month into the 1.0 patch, and that's what it looks like. It's pretty cool. 1.0 has been pretty good so far. Lots of build diversity. I'm definitely looking forward to bug fixes. I'm looking forward to 1.1 when they finally nerf healing hands, the ward generation. Because when you nerf the ward generation, then it kind of opens the door to like exploring different versions of it, where maybe you're trying to like the electrify stuff, or like maybe melee electrify, or bleed, or ignite, something that doesn't just benefit from the healing hands, healing effectiveness, giving you ward generation as well. So I'm looking forward to nerfs. I'm looking forward to lots and lots of bug fixes. But if you have any comments for like stuff you've been working on, maybe off meta builds that you want to see on the ladder, like maybe builds like, oh, you know what? There's a great one here. Or builds like the laser Lich. Yeah, the laser Lich using the Stygian coal. That kind of build, I actually did not see that anywhere on the ladder. I don't know how well it performs in an arena situation, because I think the Lich really needs something like Ghost Flame and like the additional damage reduction from Ghost Flame to push as high as possible. But of course, seeing that build perform in Echoes, the laser Lich using Stygian coal, it's insane. It's really cool. It's extremely high damage, does tons of single target damage as well, but it's not the kind of thing that I have access to when I'm just perusing through the ladder, because it's not something that people are using in ladder either. So that's about it. Cool stuff. Let me know your thoughts. I'll see you next time.